Hey, I'm Guy Oshry,
And I'm James Benoit.
and today we're going to be talking about the American Revolution. Now, most of us already know about the American Revolution, most of the facts about it, the importance, the significance, but what we don't know about is the role that we played in the American Revolution. And when I say we, I mean Northern Florida. You don't learn too much about it, but Northern Florida actually played a pretty crucial role in the American Revolution. But wait, first we need some context.
Now, Florida was one of the first mainland regions to be settled by the Europeans after the discovery of the New World in the early 1500s. Since this time, control of Florida has been passed between the English, French, and the Spanish. When the New World was discovered, Florida was claimed by Spain, who established a colony in the present-day Sunshine State. While the French and Indian War was happening, which was a war between the English and French, with Native American alliances on both sides, British gained control of the valuable colonies of Cuba and the Philippines, which were both previously claimed by the Spanish. These colonies, being vital to Spain, led them into signing the First Treaty of Paris in 1763, which ceded La Florida to the English. In return, Britain would give back Cuba and the Philippines.
The Spanish would eventually regain Florida in 1784, but let's focus on the Revolution. What was Florida like in this British era from 1763 to 1784, which you might notice falls right under the time of the American Revolution? Well, immediately after the Treaty of Paris was signed, most of the population of Florida was Spanish, and most of these Spanish settlers decided to move to Cuba. So when Britain gained control of Florida, they decided that it was too large to govern as one area and divided it into what were known as East and West Florida. These two colonies were divided under the Apalachicola River. East Florida, being the bigger colony, had its capital in St. Augustine, which also happens to be the longest continually inhabited city in the United States. West Florida had its capital in Pensacola. Let's take a closer look at St. Augustine. I'm here at the beautiful Castillo de San Marcos Monument in St. Augustine, Florida. Now, during the Revolutionary era, East and West Florida remained loyal to Great Britain. With this, the capital of East Florida, St. Augustine, became a military stronghold and the central command post for military operations in the southern colonies. As you can see, it's quite sunny out here, and you can't feel it, but it's pretty warm. This warm climate would be great at adjusting the British troops to the warmer weather in the colonies. The town quickly became overrun with British troops and loyalist refugees fleeing from battles in the Carolinas and Georgia. The very fort behind us, as you can see, Castillo de San Marcos, renamed Fort Mark, was used as a supply base and prisoner of war camp for rebels that were captured. Now, these rebels included 3 signers of the Declaration of Independence. As we mentioned earlier, most people that lived in the colony of Florida had moved back to Cuba. This was a great problem for Britain, as their new colonies were sparsely populated. During the war, Britain needed Florida to produce things such as silk, cotton, rice, and oil. Because of the bare population and the need for Florida to produce, Britain gave out land grants to plantation owners that rewarded them based on what they produced for the throne. A man by the name of Andrew Turnbull and his 2 partners received a grant for 20,000 acres of land. The men set out for East Florida looking to establish a great settlement by the name of New Smyrna. For his labor needs, Turnbull recruited roughly 1,000 people from the island of Minocqua and another couple hundred Mediterraneans as indentured servants. Turnbull's vision of a great settlement would quickly turn sour as over 100 of his men died only on the voyage to Florida. Suffering many deaths in the first year, things were looking down for the colony of New Smyrna. A year later, things were starting to actually look up. The death toll had dropped significantly, and the settlement began to produce a good amount of crop. These good years would not last, though, as droughts plagued the area, bringing crop yield down and the death toll up once again. After these droughts, things did pick up again, but the workers of the settlement were not happy. They believed Turnbull would not fulfill their contracts and had bad relationships with their overseers. This led the settlement to producing insufficient amount of crops, which led Great Britain to stop supporting the settlement in turn. By 1777, the settlement of New Smyrna was abandoned. But wait, We can't talk about Florida during the Revolutionary era without talking about Hewitt's sawmill. John Hewitt was known to be a master builder and contractor. Hewitt found himself in St. Augustine before the Revolutionary War even started. He went on to gain 1,000 acres in an area known as Pellicer Creek, which falls today into our modern-day Flagler County. Shortly after moving to this property, Hewitt went on to construct a sawmill powered by water. Hydraulic sawmills were very advanced at this time. It is believed that many of the buildings made in St. Augustine around that time were built from wood that came from Hewitt's mill. Again, East and West Florida were the only colonies in the South that remained loyal to the throne. With this, many loyalists from surrounding colonies fled into Florida, which led to a housing shortage, which just gave more demand for lumber, hence more work for Hewitt's mill.
A crucial part of northern Florida in this revolutionary period was the King's Road, which stretched all the way from St. Mary's River to the south of New Smyrna. Knowing that he needed to repopulate the area of East Florida, the then governor James Grant decided that if people were going to come to his new colony, they would need a roadway. Grant would go on to raise the funds that he needed for his new road from the public. The northern part of the road was finally constructed in 1764 by two brothers, Charles and Jermyn Wright. The southern portion of the highway would be under the supervision of John Moultrie, who was the lieutenant governor of East Florida. This portion of the road would not be constructed until 1767, although it was mostly for the benefit of John Turnbull and his New Smyrna colony. During the Revolutionary War, the Americans would use this very road to attack the British in the Battle of Alligator Creek Bridge, which happened in 1778 and led to a British victory after an unsuccessful attempt by the Americans to seize East Florida from the British. Let's get a closer look at the Old King's Road.
Taverns along Old King's Road served as a meeting ground for patriots, loyalists, and travelers alike. Ideas and intelligence flowed throughout the road and became a hub for revolutionary ideas. Patriot forces strategically utilized Old King's Road for communications and troop movements. The road's strategic importance heightened during the southern area of the war. British forces recognized the strategic importance of Old King's Road, leading to skirmishes and clashes as control of the road became a focal point in the struggle for dominance during the war. The culmination of Old King's Road's significance unfolded in battles like the Siege of Pensacola.
What was the Siege of Pensacola? The Siege of Pensacola was one of the only battles during the American Revolution to happen in Florida. After Spain had entered the war in 1779 as an ally of the Americans, the governor of Spanish Louisiana, a man named Bernardo de Galvez, was eager to take West Florida from the British. This began with an assault on the British Fort Boone, which gave the Spanish control of the lower Mississippi River. After this, Galvez would capture the surrendering forces on the Battle of Baton Rouge. After these successes, Galvez started planning an attack on Pensacola, the capital of West Florida. Using Cuban forces, Galvez would launch an attack on the capital from Fort Charlotte. Before the battle, British General John Campbell requested reinforcements and constructed additional defenses. A second Spanish unit had entered Pensacola through the bay and fought pro-British Native Americans. After this skirmish, the unit from the bay, led by Arturo O'Neill, met up with the unit from Fort Charlotte. The Spanish began to prepare for a complete siege and receive French and Spanish reinforcements. After a 2-month siege, Spain had gained control of Pensacola. During this battle, 105 British lives were lost, as well as 78 Spanish lives. Well, that's it. Hopefully you learned something about the role we played in the American Revolution. While Florida didn't play as big of a role as other colonies, it is still often overlooked. Our schools should be encouraged to teach about our colonial and revolutionary history. Children can be taken to these historical sites such as the Old King's Road, Hewitt's Sawmill, and Fort Castillo de San Marcos.